In the spring of 1873, newspaper and magazine readers around the world are captivated by amazing news telegraphed from a remote corner of northeastern California. Reporters, photographers, and illustrators have rushed to the scene, hoping to get a glimpse at the extraordinary events unfolding there. The story has many of the elements guaranteed to sell papers. Assassination, treachery, a David and Goliath confrontation of two disproportionate fighting forces. Here in a bleak landscape of volcanic rock, a tiny band of warriors, fewer than 70, is facing off hundreds of American soldiers. And so far, the Indians are winning. They are the Modocs, a Native American people small in number, but mighty in pride, skilled in strategy, and fierce in the defense of their homeland.
The Modoc people knew they were right in what they were doing. They knew the other people were wrong in trying to remove them from their land. And the desire to live here. This is home, and nobody can drive us away from it and rightly take it from us.
Although they are little known today, in 1873, the Modocs struck fear in the hearts of white civilians and the military. Men like Sitting Bull of the Lakotas and Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce would become famous for their bold defiance. But before them came the Modocs and a leader known as Captain Jack. The 1840s. More than 5,000 square miles along what would become the Oregon-California border are the home of several Native American tribes. It is a land of dramatic and beautiful contrasts.
There were almost no whites there at the time. This was an elevated grassy plateau country spotted with lakes and covered with an immense lava flow, the product of some ancient volcanic eruption, and bordered on the west by the looming Sierra Nevada mountains.
Many tribes called this land home. Among them, the Modocs, a migratory people who travel from place to place for food and water as the seasons vary. The men hunt and fish. The women gather seeds and plants, harvesting tule reeds from Tule Lake and the Lost River to weave hats and beautifully intricate baskets.
They had a place that was wealthy in food, abundance in fish, abundance in deer, bear, the whole thing. They had everything.
Everything that we need comes from this earth. So we lived in balance with it. Everything was sacred to us. Fruits and berries and roots that we picked, dug up. All part of our life, all related to happiness and being happy, being free. That changed.
Direct contact with whites is limited until the late 1840s. A new southern route for the Oregon Trail runs directly through Modoc territory. And in 1848 comes the event that will help trigger years of conflict. Gold is discovered at Sutter's Mill, California. Gold rush fever sweeps the California mountains. Mining towns like Wairika spring up on the edge of Modoc lands. Angry at this intrusion and seeking revenge and plunder, the Modocs attack emigrant wagon trains. So many lives are lost at one end of Tule Lake, the area becomes known as Bloody Point.
I think innately they just knew that their land would be gone if they didn't eliminate the invader. And so they were fighting not only for their land, they were fighting for themselves, for their families, for their very culture.
November 1852. The whites strike back. A young, brutal Indian fighter named Ben Wright and a posse of men from Wairika lure in a band of Modocs under a flag of truce. Wright walks into the Modocs' encampment and guns down one of the tribe's leaders in cold blood as his Confederates open fire on the others. 41 Modocs lie dead. In a tribe of only a few hundred, the loss is horrendous.
That was a violation of trust as far as my people were concerned. The one thing with my people is a man's word is a man's word. And they felt that a man came in and very dishonestly set them up. I think from then on, any type of sitting down and talking together was dealt with suspicion.
For many years afterwards, the Modocs never forgot, the Modocs never forgave the Ben Wright massacre.
Increasingly, the gold miners who come to Modoc country are joined by ranchers and farmers who settle in to stay. Although resentful of the intrusion, many of the Modocs spend time in towns like Wairika and Linkville, trading goods and doing odd jobs for the white settlers. One of them is a dynamic young Modoc leader named Kintbush. As happens with all the Modocs, the whites have given Kintbush a name in English, Captain Jack.
The Modoc language is very much down in the throat, and the white settlers had trouble pronouncing the names, so they renamed them. I mean, there's a problem, they solved it. Thus, Captain Jack, Boston Charlie was very fair, Black Jim was very dark. Steamboat Frank's mother had a very deep and resounding voice, and my great-grandfather, whose Indian name was Shkikatitiko, was renamed Shack Nasty Jim because his mother was a poor housekeeper, at least that's what legend tells us.
October 1864. To bring an end to hostilities in the area, the United States begins formal treaty negotiations with the Modocs and their neighbors, the Klamaths and Paiutes. In return for the promise of annual payments and supplies, the tribes agree to turn over their land and move to a reservation on Upper and Middle Klamath Lakes. Captain Jack is one of those who sign, but with great reluctance. He cannot tolerate the idea of giving up the Modoc homeland along Tule Lake and the Lost River.
The Modocs, they had a strong belief that you know, God, the old man, gave them the Lost River country to protect. They protected for centuries against other tribes, and here come the white man. And they still believe it was theirs, only to find out, you know, somebody else had other ideas.
Within months, Captain Jack and his band are off the reservation and back in Lost River, much to the dismay and anger of the settlers. The Modoc renegades remain at large for 3 years. May 1869. President Ulysses S. Grant appoints a new Indian superintendent for Oregon, a Republican Party loyalist and temperance man named Alfred B. Meacham. Meacham, it is said, can talk the legs off a cast iron pot in 10 minutes. With a little assistance from the Army, he is able to persuade Captain Jack and his followers to come back to the reservation. The return doesn't last long. The money and supplies promised by the government do not come, and many of the Modocs chafe at life among the more populous Klamaths, who bully and ridicule them.
They didn't get along with the Klamaths to start off with, and to be put in a place beside them was probably demeaning as far as they thought, and unfair, because they were taken away from such abundance to nothing.
Captain Jack takes his grievances to the agent in charge of the reservation, but he is first ignored and then threatened by the agent. For Captain Jack, it's the final straw. April 1870. Jack and nearly 400 others leave and head home to Lost River. This time, he says, for good. Fall 1872. Captain Jack's Modocs have been back in the Lost River Tule Lake area for 2.5 years. Outraged settlers insist that the government do something. A new Indian superintendent has replaced Alfred Meacham. He receives orders from Washington to get the Modocs back onto the reservation, peaceably if you can, forcibly if you must.
So the die was cast and a company of cavalry was sent to remove Jack. A company of cavalry is not a large military force. They averaged about 30 men at that time. And the commanding officer of that company didn't handle his assignment very well.
November 29, 1872. At dawn, the soldiers intend to take Jack by surprise and place him under arrest. There is no sign of Captain Jack. Lieutenant F.A. Bottell is ordered to seize the rifle of Scarface Charlie, one of Captain Jack's finest warriors. As Bottell goes to do so, Charlie aims his rifle right at him.
I called out to the men, "Shoot over those Indians," and raised my pistol and fired at Scarface Charlie. Great minds appear to have fought alike. At the same instant, Charlie raised his rifle and fired at me.
Nobody knows who fired the first shot between the two of them. Both of them missed, and from there on, we have a war now.
The Modocs retreat, and the cavalrymen burned down Captain Jack's village. One group of Modoc warriors, led by the man called Hooker Jim, decide to take revenge. They go on a rampage around Tule Lake. The settlers, who do not know about the confrontation between the Modocs and the Army, are totally unsuspecting and unprotected.
Most of them were out in the field cutting grain or something, or chopping wood or something of the sort, when the Indians come whooping into their farm and shoot them.
The Modocs take care not to kill women and children, but when Hooker Jim and his comrades are done, 14 white men are dead. Captain Jack His men and their families flee into a mysterious area of volcanic rocks and caves. These are the barren and forbidding lava beds, a place of both strategic and spiritual power for the Modocs. The land of burnt-out fires. Here, the landscape provides Jack with a natural fortress of stone. It will become known to the world as Captain Jack's Stronghold.
They came here knowing how they could use the land against their enemy. So they literally took the very elements of the earth and they turned it to fight in the war. That's why they came here.
More than a month and a half go by as the Army awaits supplies and reinforcements, readying themselves for an assault on Captain Jack's stronghold. They are confident of success. Soldiers brag that they will have Modoc steak for dinner. Their commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Wheaton, reports,
"We are now in better condition than I ever saw troops for a movement against hostile Indians. We leave for Captain Jack's Gibraltar tomorrow. I don't understand how they can think of any serious resistance."
But the Modocs are equally, if not more, confident. One reason, they believe they have strong medicine on their side in the person of the powerful Modoc shaman, curly-headed doctor.
Curly-headed doctor gave the Modoc people the hope and the courage to continue fighting because they believed they were invincible. They didn't think they could be defeated. And if you believe that you will not die and you cannot be defeated, you will fight.
The medicine man has made a rope of woven tule, hundreds of feet long, and painted it red. He encircles the stronghold with it and tells the warriors that while they stay inside the rope, no soldier will enter and no bullets can hurt them. Dawn, Friday, January 17th, 1873. Vast banks of fog roll in that obscure the Modocs from their enemy. The army gingerly moves across the lava beds, slowly picking its way through the treacherous, rocky, slippery terrain.
They never had clue, one, of the land that they were walking into, and I don't think they had an idea of the spirit of the people that they were dealing with either.
Shot at by warriors they cannot see, the soldiers may as well be paper targets in a shooting gallery.
The crevices here were marvelous because the Indians learned how to use them. They were in back of the enemy, they were in front of the enemy, beside the enemy, and they never even knew where they were. One young lieutenant was wounded twice, and he had to ride home and tell his mother he'd not yet seen an Indian.
For the Army, it is a military disaster. Superior in numbers, they have been routed by a handful of warriors. Soldiers retreat in panic, leaving the dead and wounded.
Aunt Jenny, her task was to go out into the battlefield and take the bodies of the soldiers and roll them over and take their clothing and their guns, whatever she could take from the body. And how distasteful and what a horrible thing that was for her as a young woman to have to do that.
Curly-headed doctor's medicine seems strong indeed. Not one Modoc has been injured. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Wheaton's post-mortem is vastly different from his cocky report on the eve of battle.
I have never before encountered an enemy, civilized or savage, occupying a position of such great natural strength as the Modoc stronghold. Nor have I ever seen troops engage a better armed and more skillful foe.
Because of the defeat, Wheaton is relieved of command and replaced by Colonel Alvin Gillum of Tennessee. Both sides hunker down for the winter. The Modocs huddle together in the caves of the stronghold. Cattle herded in natural stone corrals keep them fed, and water is available from Tule Lake. But surviving in the lava beds is hard.
It's really hard to imagine the hardship they went through, especially with the women that were there or the children that were there. It'd be hard enough on the men to do it. Who knows what a person can do when they're fighting for their life? Not only their life, but life of the rest of the women and children.
Winter is not the only reason for the lull in the fighting.
A great number of Easterners thought the Indians were being mistreated, and there were peace committees forming in Philadelphia and in New York City and other places, putting pressure on the War Department to bring this war to a conclusion without further bloodshed.
When news of the Army's defeat at the stronghold reaches Washington, the government creates a peace commission to go west to talk Jack out of the lava beds and onto a reservation. At its head is the silver-tongued Alfred Meacham. Ironically, this attempt at settling the war peacefully will only lead to more bloodshed and an unprecedented event that will shock the nation. April 1873. The Federal Peace Commission has been in Modoc country since the third week in February. Colonel Gillum now has 700 men under his new command. The Modocs are alarmed by the large tightening cordon of troops. But at this point, the war is one of words, each side attempting to negotiate but getting nowhere.
What the Modocs wanted is what they had always wanted, a reservation on Lost River. This was the bottom line. This was Jack's terms. And wanted the soldiers withdrawn, wanted amnesty for Hooker Jim's murderers of the Tule Lake settlers.
The most powerful of the peace commissioners is an unofficial one, General Edward R.S. Canby. Not trusting Meacham, Army Chief William Tecumseh Sherman has asked Canby to take over the peace talks. A Civil War hero and acting head of the Military Division of the Pacific, Canby prides himself on his ability to deal with Native Americans. But the Modocs defy his self-professed diplomatic skill.
They are the strangest mixture of insolence and arrogance that I have ever seen, even among Indians. They have no faith in themselves and have no confidence in anyone else. Treacherous themselves, they suspect treachery in everyone.
Everything the commission does is under the spotlight of the press, which has descended on the peace talks in a feeding frenzy. The Modocs are big news.
I think another element that gradually took shape as the newspapers developed this story was, at least in the East, kind of a a public fascination and then sympathy for the underdog. Captain Jack sort of appealed to a lot of those people.
What neither the media, the military, nor the Commission realize is the enormous pressure Jack is under from within his own camp. Many of the Modocs, urged on by Hooker Jim and curly-headed Doctor, are in a dark and murderous mood. They want Jack to make a deadly preemptive strike. General Canby agrees to a new negotiating session with the Modocs. The meeting will be held at their neutral meeting place, a tent pitched halfway between the camp of Colonel Gillum and the lava beds. The day, April 11th, Good Friday. The night before the meeting, the Modocs hold a council before the rostrum outside Captain Jack's cave. Jack urges restraint, but is shouted down. It is decided. The peace commissioners must be assassinated. If they die, the soldiers will be scared and go away. When Jack resists, he is ridiculed and humiliated.
They got a woman's shawl and put it on Jack's shoulders, and he threw it off with indignation, and then they grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground, and then put on some women's clothes and called him an old lady who wouldn't fight. And it was hard his pride. So he says, well, if you want to do it, we'll all get hanged, he said, but I'll lead you. We'll do it.
The decision made, Jack is reluctant and melancholy.
I feel as though I was lost and among strange people. My heart tells me I had just as well talk to the clouds and wind. My people, let us love life. Let us not walk into the jaws of death. Death will come to us soon enough.
Good Friday morning. The Commission's Modoc translator, Toby Riddle, has heard rumors of trouble. She pleads with them not to go. Canby refuses to postpone the meeting. The Modocs already are at the meeting site. Hiding among the rocks are two young men with a cache of firearms. The commissioners arrive. All shake hands. Canby passes out cigars. The talks commence. They are quickly at their usual impasse. Hooker Jim goes up to Meacham's horse, takes the commissioner's coat from the saddle, and tries it on for size. Years later, Meacham would vividly remember the chilling premonition he and the others felt at that very moment.
They read their fate in Hooker's action. They realize how fearfully near the impending doom must be. Every act tells, too plainly to be mistaken, how each one feels and what they are expecting.
Silently, Meacham tries to signal Canby, but there's no time. Suddenly, firearms are everywhere.
Captain Jack, thrusting his hand under the left breast of his coat, draws a six-shooter and shouts in a loud voice, "Otway Kotooks, all ready!" Cocking the pistol, he points it at General Canby's head, touches the trigger, and explodes the cap, but does not the powder. Quickly, he revolves the cylinder and again presents it to the petrified general, who stands unmoved. Why, oh why, does he not close on the monster and wrench the weapon from him? Quick, General, quick. He is too late. Another instant, and a shot is passing through his head.
2 shots kill a second commissioner, the Reverend Eleazar Thomas. A hail of gunfire pursues Alfred Meacham. He stumbles to the ground, unhit, but a ricocheting bullet knocks him out. Thinking he's dead, the Modocs strip and begin to scalp him. Meacham is saved when the Commission's Modoc interpreter, Toby Riddle, yells that soldiers are on the way. News of the killings is telegraphed around the world. Back in the stronghold, curly-headed Doctor begins a victory dance that will last all Easter weekend.
They could not have realized that the people in the East who had been supporting them up to that point were now 100% against them. They killed the only general officer of the United States Army who lose his life in the Indian Wars. The nation was aghast at that particular action.
General Sherman wires Colonel Gillem at the lava beds.
Your dispatch announcing the terrible loss to the country of General Canby by the perfidy of the Modoc band of Indians has been shown to the President, who authorizes me to instruct you to make the attacks so strong and persistent that their fate may be commensurate with their crime. You will be fully justified in their utter extermination.
April 14th. Gillem launches a new 2-pronged assault on the stronghold. This time, they do not retreat at the end of the first day, and 2 things happen that destroy the power of curly-headed Doctor. Soldiers breach his magic Thule rope, and the Modoc is killed attempting to pull the detonator out of an unexploded cannonball. The shaman's medicine has failed them. What's more, troops secure the shores of Thule Lake, cutting the Modocs off from their water supply. The army is confident of victory, but once again, the army is wrong.
The Modocs knew the day they walked into Captain Jack's stronghold that when the going got tough, they would just walk out. And it was an extraordinary happening and totally dumbfounded the army, the military people. When they came in to take the surrender of the Modocs, they weren't there.
Gillem's men have succeeded in taking the stronghold, but it's a hollow conquest. The Modocs are again on the loose. April 26, 1873. Captain Jack and the Modocs have fled south. Colonel Gillem decides to send a scouting party in the same direction. They are to go to a promontory now called Hardin Butte to see if it will make a good artillery position. The Modocs get there first. Jack, Scarface Charlie, and 24 warriors await the arrival of 64 officers and men, including Captain Evan Thomas and Lieutenant T.F. Wright.
They had marched out there to the base of the butte. It was noon, and they stopped to eat lunch. And the Indians thought they were crazy, because they were all on the ridge up above them, looking down. And here were these fellows, some of them even took their shoes off because they'd been marching through those rocks and it was hard on their feet. Had no sentries out.
Thomas starts to climb the butte to signal Gillem's camp that they have seen no Indians. That's when the shooting begins.
The Thomas Wright Patrol was one of the great disasters in the Indian Wars of the West. And how the Army could be, how those troops could be so careless of both the leadership and the men themselves, and settling down to have lunch in the middle of the lava beds And the Indians did not necessarily have to be any supermen to just wipe out that entire patrol.
The fighting goes on for 3 hours. Then the Modocs suddenly stop. Scarface Charlie calls out,
"All you fellas that ain't dead had better go home. We don't want to kill you all in one day."
The slaughter is yet another indignity for the United States, but it is to be the last as far as the Modocs are concerned. Gillem is stripped of his command. Colonel Jefferson C. Davis, who has been appointed to replace the late General Canby, takes over.
For the first time in this whole sorry tale, we have a competent senior officer on the scene. As soon as he could, Davis got to the lava beds and assumed personal command of the troops on the scene.
Davis orders the troops to stay out on patrol until all the Modocs are captured or dead. The unrelenting pressure is a success. The Modocs suffer their first military defeats, and morale and unity begin to shatter. Thursday, May 22nd. Hooker Jim and his band surrender. Captain Jack and 37 other warriors are still at large, the army in hot pursuit. May 1873. Captain Jack and a small group of warriors show no signs of surrendering. Hooker Jim and 3 others, Shack Nasty Jim, Bogus Charlie, and Steamboat Frank, tell Colonel Davis they think they can track down Jack. Hooker Jim had murdered the Tule Lake settlers, and all 4 had been among those humiliating Jack and insisting that he murder General Canby. Now these so-called Modoc bloodhounds will betray Captain Jack to save their own necks.
Davis would have made a bargain with the devil if that would have helped him capture Captain Jack. As it turned out, he almost did.
In a short time, the 4 Modocs track Jack down. He confronts them at his camp.
You intend to buy your liberty and freedom by running me to the earth and delivering me to the soldiers? I will die by my own hand before I let you get the praise of capturing me, you hardy dogs. I little suspected you when I agreed to kill Canby, when you forced me to do that cowardly act, that you would turn traitor to me.
June 1st, starving, exhausted, and with little to back up his brave words, even the great Captain Jack must finally surrender.
Captain Jack was practically deserted. There's only a few people still with him. He was hiding in a cave in the side of a canyon. And the troopers came across him, came upon him. They used one of the Modocs Indians to talk him into surrender. He came out, he made no great speech. He simply put down his weapons and said that his legs had given out, and thus the Modoc War ended.
For their services to the Army, the 4 Modoc bloodhounds will go unpunished for their crimes. But on July 1st, Captain Jack and 5 others involved in the Peace Commission murders, including Linsconchin's great-great-grandfather, go on military trial.
I look at the trial as being a sham. The judge advocate approaches them the second day. Are you represented by counsel? Well, of course they knew they weren't represented by counsel, and some of the historians wrote that, the Modocs didn't go out and acquire counsel. Well, where are a group of Indians going to go acquire counsel?
All are found guilty and sentenced to hang on October 3rd. Shortly before the executions, Captain Jack is allowed to visit his 2 wives and daughter Rose in the Fort Klamath stockade. A reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle observes,
"A little girl ran toward her father, rending the air with frantic screams. Captain Jack extended his arms and turned his head aside. For several minutes he maintained this position, embracing the child. Yet his countenance gave no indication of the great emotion which must have stirred his inmost soul.
October 3rd. From the guardhouse, the condemned men can see their open graves. Press and citizens have come from miles around to witness the executions. The Klamaths and surviving Modocs are given ringside seats. The 6 men are driven to the gallows in a wagon, sitting atop 4 coffins. The charges are read, and then it is announced that the sentences of 2 of the 6, the boys who hid the weapons at the peace meeting, have been commuted to life in prison at Alcatraz. Davis has known this for weeks, but wanted to punish the 2 by not telling them. The other 4 prepare to die. A last prayer. A white handkerchief waves. An axe cuts the support rope. The 4 men fall. Afterwards, bits of the nooses sell for $5 apiece. That night, the bodies are beheaded. Eventually, the skulls will go to the Smithsonian. Sunday, October 12th. Under secret orders, the 153 survivors of Captain Jack's band, men, women, and children, are taken by train to Nebraska.
They had never seen a train before. They did not know what was going to happen to them. They were lightly clothed. It was a hard winter. I'm sure they were frightened.
From Nebraska, the Modocs make their way to the Quapaw Agency in Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. Some do not survive the trip.
I don't think any one of them died of a disease or of hunger. I think they died of a broken spirit. They lost everything, their home, their families, their leadership, and I firmly believe that they died of a broken spirit.
One of the first to die in the faraway Indian Territory is the weeping child who embraced Captain Jack shortly before the executions. His 4-year-old daughter, Rose.
will be fully justified in their utter extermination.
Despite General Sherman's desire to erase the Modoc people from the face of the earth, they survive. Many of Captain Jack's followers became successful farmers and ranchers at the Quapaw Agency. Today, the Modoc tribe of Oklahoma thrives under the leadership of people like Chief Bill Follis. After decades of forced exile, the government said the remainder of Captain Jack's band could, if they wished, return west and live on the Klamath Reservation. Many did so. In a way, even Captain Jack has come home. His skull and those of the others executed respectfully return to the Modoc people.
That one's Bonnet's grandpa, right there.
Modoc descendants of those who bore witness to that last fight still tell the stories and share the memories.
That's my grandpa's thing.
What is this one?
That's Royce and Adeline and Nathan.
Debbie Herrera's great-grandmother, Toby Riddle, warned the peace commissioners of impending tragedy. To this day, she saves the photographs and other mementos of the Modoc people and will pass them down to her children.
I heard that we lost our culture and the whole bit, you know. But as far as being Modoc, you know, I am Modoc. I will always be Modoc.
The lava beds are now a national monument. Modoc young people such as Debbie Herrera's son Quinn can come here and remember the handful of proud fighters who defied an entire army.
To me, it's just like going to Vietnam or going to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington or going to the Lincoln Memorial, you know, memorial of heroes and great people. And to me, the lava beds is like a memorial for the great warriors of my ancestors who fought and died for what they believed was theirs or what they believed in. These were my people, you know. They fought or they did whatever they could to make sure that I could be here today.